Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. I miss you so much. I've been praying for you, praying a lot about what God wanted me to teach today. And I think I went around the world or around the Bible a couple of times before God led me to today's lesson. So I hope this speaks to you because it has spoken to me. I'm going to start out with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for today, and thank you for the blessings that you've given us. Thank you for loving us. Lord, you know what each person is going through right now, and I ask you to touch them in a mighty way. Lord, let your will be done. Put your angels all around them and protect them. Help them know how much you love them. Let them see you in the day-to-day. Let them feel your presence. Lord, tug on their heart and let them remember to look to you for guidance. Lord, be with all those that are sick, that are a part of our church family, and be with the military and this nation, God. Just thank you for loving us. We ask these things in your sweet name. Amen. So we've talked many times before about David and Goliath. David was what everybody considers the underdog, and he was the little guy next to the giant. Goliath was 9 feet tall, over 9 feet tall, and he comes trying to battle the Israelites, the Philistines. He was a Philistine, and their army came to try to battle the Israelites. Well, the Israelites were scared of all these giant men, and were cowering down. They didn't know how to defeat this giant. We talk about this story a lot when we talk about the underdog winning over the big name, the big rivalry. But all throughout the Bible, there are people who had to face their giants. They weren't literal giant people, but it was giant circumstances. You've got Moses, who, first of all, he had to overcome his fear of speaking and got somebody else really to come talk for him. And then he had to face Pharaoh. That was their giant, to get the Israelites out of slavery. There's Noah. It had never rained before, so people thought he was crazy when he told them that water was going to fall from the sky and it's going to flood the earth and we got to build this big boat. People thought he was crazy. Esther or Ruth. Esther was put in a position in the king's court, and she had to stand up for her people. She could have died by standing up for her people, but that was the giant she had to face. Ruth was her husband had died. She was widowed, and she had no way to take care of herself. So she had to overcome losing a loved one. She left her family to go with her mother-in-law, and then had to find a way to provide for her and her mother-in-law. When you go to the New Testament, many of the disciples, after Jesus ascended to heaven, faced difficulties and giants, trials that they had to face. Peter was in jail. They were all, pretty much all, killed for their beliefs. John was put in exile. He was banished, quarantined to an island. And Paul in the New Testament, the first missionary, he was put in prison. He was shipwrecked. He had all these trials that he had to overcome, that at the time were giants he had to face. Or when you think about Mary, the mother of Jesus, she was a teenager, and she had to go tell the man who was supposed to be her husband and her family that she was pregnant. Oh, but it's God's kid. That could have been a giant circumstance because people didn't believe her. We have giants that we have to face, but the way we face those giants matter. I'm going to look at a couple of examples today about how we face giants to overcome them. The first, I'm going to look at David and Goliath, the one that we think of the most. Like I said, David was he was the youngest of his brothers, and he had been kept back at home. He was not a part of the Israelite army. He had been kept back home to tend the sheep. He was a shepherd. And his dad, Jesse, told him, go give this food to your brothers. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, which is where the story is found. It had been, for 40 days, the Philistines had came forward every morning, every evening, and took their stand and called out to the Israelites, like, what you gonna do? Here we are, what you gonna do about it? Basically. But in verse 17, now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah, I never say that word right, of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They were with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. Okay, so he's just taking them some food and supposed to see how they are so he can come back and tell his dad how they are. So early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse has directed. So he obeyed. He done exactly what his father told him to do. When he reached the camp, as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry, Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. So all the Israelite army is afraid of this man. They would run in fear. The king had said that whoever can defeat this man, he will give them great wealth, and he will give him also his daughter in marriage, and will exempt his family from the taxes of Israel. So David's asking all these questions. What's going to happen to whoever kills him? And one of the first things he says, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So the first things he says, he's talking about God. So they tell him what would happen. Well, his brothers start being brothers and say, what are you doing? Hush, go away. David said to the king, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Look, I'll go fight him. He says that I have killed a lion or a bear and carried it off. I've killed them when it tried to carry a sheep off from the flock. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. He comes in talking about God. When he goes to Goliath, skipping down to verse 45, David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. So he comes in, and the first thing he does is he's talking about God. After he says that, he takes his one stone out of his pocket, he got 5, and goes running toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. So, when you read this chapter, there's about 9 times since from the time David got there until he kills the Philistine that he talks about God. 9 times that he talks about God's armies or the battle is the Lord's. He only mentions Goliath or the Philistine twice. So he's not paying attention to the enemy. He's focusing on his God. He obeyed his dad and took immediately the next day, took the food to his brothers. He gets there and he knew that God wanted him to do something. He was close enough to God that he knew, and he immediately obeyed. I want to look at someone else, also in the Old Testament. In the book of Jonah, you heard this story a lot too. Jonah and the big fish. Jonah did kind of the opposite of what David did. This story is told, there's 4 chapters in the book of Jonah, and Jonah's story is told in these 4 chapters. I'm not going to read all of them. But the book starts out, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. So God told him, go to the city of Nineveh. That's pretty plain. There's not really much wiggle room there. Jonah heard that, but instead of running toward the problem like David did, Jonah ran away. Verse 3, but Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. So he's running away from his giant. He didn't like the people of Nineveh. Nineveh was a big town, a wealthy town, and they were not living the way God wanted them to. So Jonah didn't think that they deserved forgiveness from God. So he ran away. He went and did not obey, went the total opposite way. He was punished. A storm came while he was on the boat. He told the people to throw him over into the sea. When they threw him into the sea, a great big fish swallowed him whole. And then when he gets into the belly of the fish, that's when he starts praying. Chapter 2 is Jonah's prayer. The Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. So he starts talking to God and about God after he's been swallowed by a big fish. David immediately talks about God. Jonah waits till he's in trouble. Jonah eventually gets spit out by the big fish and goes to Nineveh. But it took him a while. He had to sit in the belly of a fish for 3 days. So what is your giant that you're facing? And what are you doing about it? Are you running towards your giant by talking about God and what he can do and that God can defeat this giant? Are you running away from what God is telling you to do and the trouble you are facing because you don't like it and you don't want to be a part of that situation, so you're running away? Now, David didn't always get it right, and we're not always going to get it right either, but that shouldn't stop us from trying. Or we're going to spend time in the belly of a big fish. Not a literal big fish, but in anxiety or worry or holding a grudge or a physical ailment. Whatever your case may be, God's going to get your attention. So we have to focus on God first to face our giants, whatever they may be. Your giants may be, I'm a worrier. I face that giant a lot. I have to battle him down, and the only way I can get him down is by praying and reading scripture. Your giant may be an illness. Your giant may be you're angry at somebody. You don't think they deserve what they have, like Jonah. Your giant may be a work problem, a family problem, a problem with a friend, a girlfriend, or boyfriend, whatever it may be. The only solution, the best solution, is going to God first and letting Him give you the answer. So your giant can fall. So your Goliath can come down. We need those Goliaths put in our life so the Davids inside of us can come out. If we'd have never known about Goliath, if David would have never stood up to his giant, we wouldn't have the story to tell. We wouldn't talk about how David looked to God and ran towards the giant because he knew God would save him. So sometimes it takes a giant in front of us for the David inside of us to come out. There's a David inside all of you, a person after God's own heart. That's who David was. So remember what God's done for you in the past. Pray to Him and listen. Be still and listen for Him to answer. Make God a priority in your life. Put Him first. And then be persistent and be passionate about what God tells you to do. David ran toward the problem. He was passionate about his God, and this is the God of Israel, God's army. We're going to defeat this giant. And so he went running towards the problem. He was persistent, he was passionate, and we have to be that way as well. We have to be persistent with our prayers. We have to be persistent with listening for God's voice. So whatever giant you're facing, let God help you take him down. We're going to close out with a word of prayer. Lord, again, I thank you for today. Lord, you know what giant they're facing. Whoever's watching this, you know what giant they're facing. So I ask you right now to remind them of past victories. Remind them of who you are. Remind them to go to your word and to look and be still so they can hear your voice. Lord, help us make you top priority so that when we put you first, everything else falls into place. And Lord, give us the endurance that we need to keep going. Help us be persistent. and passionate about our what you would have us to do. Give us that desire. Give us that passion. Show us what we need to do for you, God. Lord, again, I just ask you to touch the youth group, those kids. Lord, just touch them in a mighty way. Draw them close to you. Keep them safe, God. We ask these things in your name. Amen. There is one song that I want you to look up and listen to. It is called See a Victory. It is by Elevation Worship. I'm making sure that's the right people. It is Elevation Worship, See a Victory. That is one of my new favorite songs. It was supposed to be a Bible school song, but since that's not happening right now, I'm sharing it with you. See a Victory by Elevation Worship. We're going to see a victory. The battle is God's. Love y'all.